Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, fellas, welcome back to the channel and the podcast. Today we're doing a little bit of mocking because it's a Friday and we mock on a Friday, but I want to really test out the strategy that I think I'm going to go with. And once all my main drafts start, I've been doing a lot of drafts for actually money and high stakes tournaments and all that, but my main strategy for redraft 2020, not dynasty, nothing like that. We do have videos on that, so check those out while you're here. Go ahead, sit back, relax, max all cool, and check out the channel. But what we're doing right now is the robust RB strategy. You might have heard it from the Podfather. You might have heard it from everybody in the league the last couple of years. But this year, I think there's some falsies to and exaggerations to it that people say wide receiver is deep. It's deep every year, right? Every team is going to start 2 wide receivers and likely 3. And some teams 4 have wide receivers on the field often in those 4 wide receiver sets. But most teams have 2 to 3 viable wide receivers when it comes to fantasy, at least 2, right? Whereas every single team usually is just going to have 1 viable running back. Now you can point to Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, right? You can point to those backfields and I'll say, okay, the San Fran backfield, and I'll say, okay, but we're talking just specifically guys who can really ball out and be top 25 wide receivers. There's very little backfields, if any, that are both going to have top 25 running backs outside of likely just Cleveland, at least in projections-wise, getting the closest. So wide receiver is always deep, and yes, it is extremely deep this year because of the way that people are drafting, and that is to snag up 2 running backs very, very early in your first 3 picks, and a lot of people are snagging up 3 running backs within your first 4 or 5 picks, and that's something that I have been doing, and that's something that I'm going to test out in this video. But I do want to put it out there that I do not think 0 RB is completely dead, because look, the whole point of 0 RB is to take advantage of exactly what these people, myself even included, are doing. Do I think that it's the optimal strategy? I think it's boom or bust. If you're playing in big tournaments, 0 RB is probably a good way to go because it sets you up to have the dominant spot at probably tight end and wide receiver, and then all you need is just 1 waiver wire hit to pay off, or one of those backup running backs to really hit off, whether it's from a holdout, whether it's from an injury, and you're set to go because you have the best position at wide receiver, tight end, and you have a very above average position at running back at that spot. So that's the whole point of it, is to take advantage of when your entire league's drafting all the running backs, and at that point they're drafting 3rd and 4th round running backs that are not that great. They're like the 20th running backs overall. You're still snatching up like wide receiver 1s, right? You're still snatching up like the wide receiver 9 and the wide receiver 12 on the turn, whatever it might be. So I have a video on 0 running back strategy, and we'll probably do an update on that as the season gets closer and we get more information. But today is going to be a robust running back, and if you're not familiar with that, it does not mean draft 4 running backs in a row. No, that would be a modified version of 0 wide receiver strategy. No, it pretty much just means draft 2 running backs very early and draft running backs generally early. What you want is you want younger running backs that are going to be workhorses, and you want to get them early. That's the biggest point of it. This does not mean in the 5th round you're forcing a running back. It doesn't mean you can't, but you want young running backs who get a big workload, whatever fits into that model. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to skip on a guy who's Le'Veon Bell at 28 if he's dropping to the 5th or 6th round, but it doesn't mean you're taking Le'Veon Bell in the 2nd round, right? Those types of things, and I don't think we have to do that. But the way I've been doing it is 3 running backs in your first 4 picks. 4 running backs in your first 5 picks is definitely not off the board, but it really depends on that 5th round pick with just what's left on the board, what's best out of running back and wide receiver. So what I've been doing is running back, wide receiver, running back. We're going to try and test out that strategy. We'll get a 9th and 10th round quarterback somewhere around there and a tight end in that range. And that's what I'm going to be aiming for. You want to be going into your draft with strategies. You don't want to be going in aiming cluelessly, because other people in your draft have probably practiced, and you want to practice as much as you can. So I appreciate you being here. Take a second of your time. Hit that like button before this draft starts off. Big old subscribe button just popped up on the screen. Bottom right-hand corner. I appreciate it if you do that. And the Supreme Draft Guide is out. It's out on my site, Fantasy Sports Focus. All the information is linked up below. Limited time offer for the people who only watch these videos and listen just through my content. $10 through Monkey Knife Fight. You can get it. That's a third of the price. It's linked down below. If you're not eligible for that offer because the state that you live in, there's a few states that aren't eligible. There's also another link to go to my website, Fantasy Sports Focus, and just purchase the draft guide on there. What are you waiting for? People have bought it. People are getting educated themselves. Go ahead, get it. Now let's get into this draft. I'm going to click the start the mock draft button right now, and we're going to be rocking and rolling. So I'll give you some of the specifics. I'm drafting from the 6th spot. It is a 12-team draft PPR format. It's only going to be 12 rounds. Now, normally, I want to do 20 rounds. I want to get as much bench spots. Give me 8 bench, 10 bench players, right? I want to take advantage that my league mates don't know the players that are going down there that were undrafted free agents, and that I can dig that deep for good talent. And you can too if you get the draft guide, if you just follow these videos. There's a whole playlist. But pretty much we're just going to do 12 rounds because of the purpose of the mock draft, right? Once you get deeper into that, that's where you can start to look at some of my deep sleepers. You can reach out to me with any questions. There'll be a bunch of content going up over the summer into the draft guide as well on really deep sleepers, 20-team leagues, all that type of stuff. So I'm here at the 6th pick right now, and this is what's gone off the board. Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Michael Thomas, Ezekiel Elliott, and Dalvin Cook. That's exactly what should have gone off the board at this point. In my PPR rankings, Alvin Kamara is next ahead of Joe Mixon at running back. I want running backs early based on the strategy that I told you, so I'm going to go take Alvin Kamara here. Now, the time that I'm filming this, Alvin Kamara has not threatened a holdout. There's a very good chance that Alvin Kamara will threaten a holdout. Joe Mixon kind of whispered it a couple months back. Dalvin Cook shouted it a good amount, and now Alvin Kamara will be the next up in that category, and and he is likely better than those two backs. You can argue with me that Dalvin Cook is the better running back than Alvin Kamara. I would say no, he is not. When you're talking about a complete running back that can do anything for their specific offense as well, I think Alvin Kamara has more leverage over the Saints just based on his skill set than you have from Dalvin Cook, because there's a guy behind him, Alexander Mattison, that fits the bill of the type of offense that they want to run with Cook, and they can slide Kamara inside. So I'm going to go with Alvin Kamara here. I haven't really gotten a lot of Alvin Kamara because he usually goes before the picks that I'm getting, or like that's the spot. That's like the only spot where I'll usually take him, like the 6th pick overall, because he'll either be off the board already and I don't get him, right? He's going off the board in the first 5 normally, or I'll be picking like 6th, 7th, or 8th, and then you're definitely not getting, or I'll be picking like 1, 2, 3, or 4, and then I'm usually taking one of McCaffrey, Saquon, Zeke, or Cook over him. So like the only spot I ever get Kamara is if he falls to 5 or 6 and all those other running backs are off the board. So a rare situation in which I'm getting Kamara. So now we got Kamara. Let's look at what the board's doing right now. So you can see the blue is running backs and the yellow on my screen behind me on the board is wide receivers. So they had Joe Mixon, Derrick Henry come off the board right after that, Jacob Sanders, Eckler, Fournette, and Kenyon Drake. So a lot of running backs go off the board, and so far we've had 6 receivers go off the board. My best available wide receiver is Kenny Golladay, my wide receiver 5, and it's going to be a pretty easy pick for me here because Nick Chubb is still on the clock. And Nick Chubb is my running back 8 right now, and the next running back after that would be Todd Gurley, my running back 13, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, my running back 14. What did I say I want? I want young, strong, talented running backs. That is Nick Chubb with a Kevin Stefanski offense that is about to come in. Yes, I know Kareem Hunt's back there. I like both of them. Lately, I think in like 3 out of my last couple of mocks, I've been getting Nick Chubb because he's just falling to the middle of the 2nd round, when in my opinion, he's probably a first-round running back. He's a guy that I would take right at that turn ahead of Josh Jacobs, ahead of Miles Sanders. I like both of those guys. Like I would love to get both of them, but I would rather have Nick Chubb and then at the turn take a Miles Sanders or a Jacobs, whoever's left. I'd probably lean Sanders right now, but literally Sanders is my RB9, Jacobs is my RB10, and Nick Chubb's my RB8. So you can tell it's all really close there. But that being said, he falls behind Fournette, he falls behind Eckler. Fournette's somebody that I think I'm personally higher on than the industry, but he's still my RB15. Eckler would be my RB, I think, 12 at this point behind Kenyon Drake and those other names mentioned. So Nick Chubb for me is the clear pick here. It's a pretty easy pick. We're going to go get our 2 running backs, and now we're going to look for a top-end wide receiver. Let's see who falls to us at the 3rd overall pick for myself. And I think it's interesting to talk, at least so far, about what's happening. It's all running backs so far. You see the tight ends as they usually do. The top ones come off the board in Kelsey and Kittle. Now, this is something that normally doesn't happen. Patrick Mahomes is still on the board with my 3rd overall pick. But that being said, I still don't believe in taking the quarterbacks this early. I mean, right? We got Patrick Mahomes in the 14th round 2 years ago. We got Lamar Jackson in the 12th to 14th round last year. So I don't think there's a guy like that this year. Daniel Jones, maybe. Probably not Gardner Minshew at that point. And then maybe it's Carson Wentz, but he's not going super late, and he's not going to really sneak up on anybody. But let's see what's still on the board. But we want to go for a wide receiver, unless there's just really good running backs left on the board. All right, so this is what just happened. Kenny Golladay went 2 picks before me. He was a very high pick on my board, by far the highest left, because he's my wide receiver 5. I have him ahead of guys like DeAndre Hopkins by 1 spot, Chris Godwin, Allen Robinson. So I really like Kenny Golladay. He doesn't fall to me. The running backs that went off the board since my last pick of Nick Chubb were Aaron Jones and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. That's fine. Aaron Jones is my running back 16. I have individual videos out on him. You could see them, just a running back video specifically dedicated to Aaron Jones on why I'm much lower on him than the RB10 consensus where he's going. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is fine. So this is where I'm left. I have Todd Gurley right now as my running back 13. He's still on the board. I can go 3 running backs in a row, but based on the strategy that I want to deploy for the specifics of this video, I want to go wide receiver here to kind of see what happens if we can get a top-notch wide receiver. But the wide receivers that I have left, DJ Moore, Robert Woods, Adam Thielen, Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley, in that order. There's a little bit of a space in between. So I think DJ Moore is my best available right now at wide receiver. He seems to be the best available amongst the Fantasy Pros consensus. I will call out that I'm drafting against auto pick consensus. So what this is Fantasy Pros takes pretty much every industry expert that you can think of, combines all of their personal rankings, their site rankings into one kind of ADP, and that's what it's going to be getting drafted off of, or one rankings list, an average, a consensus of all the experts. So that's what I'm basically drafting against here. So you're rarely going to get guys that drop too far. So I could go Todd Gurley here, one of like maybe 3 or 4 running backs in the entire NFL, Christian McCaffrey being one of them, that just doesn't have any backfield competition, potentially Leonard Fournette being another one, when it comes to like who's going to take their touches. Brian Hill, Ito Smith, guys that are potentially even a cut candidate, those guys aren't going to be taking Quadri Olsen. Nobody's taking his touches, so you lock up your 3 running backs early. In a real draft, like if I wasn't doing it for the specifics of this video, the strategy, if this was my real draft, I'd probably snag Todd Gurley here and go 3 running backs in a row and just be done with the position. But let's go to DJ Moore, my wide receiver 11. I think DJ Moore has the upside. I mean, in Dynasty to be a first-round pick for sure, but I think DJ Moore has the overall upside to finish as a top 8 or a top 5 wide receiver. Like last year, he was pretty much in that mix. He just didn't have the touchdowns. Now you're going from awful quarterbacks from Kyle Allen last year, just so many bad quarterbacks, Cam Newton playing bum for 2 to 3 games, and now you're going to Teddy Bridgewater, who is one of the more accurate quarterbacks, who runs a very good system when he needs to be in it, and he's surrounded by talent. So I do like that. Now the goal would be to get a running back, unless there's just really good wide receivers left. So let's see what we have left on the board after my pick at 306. Let's go to the 407. So I think my pick at the 407 is going to be another easy one. So what I have left at running back, my top 18 running backs are gone, but my 19th overall is Jonathan Taylor. He is still on the board. 20th overall is David Johnson. 21st is Le'Veon Bell. 22nd is David Montgomery, a little peek behind some of the rankings. You can go and get the rest of them, PPR and non-PPR, over on the site link down below. My Supreme Draft Guide, Fantasy Sports Focus, check it out. But my wide receivers left, I still don't want a tight end or a quarterback. My wide receivers left, I have a pretty wide gap here. My wide receiver 12 is Robert Woods. He's still on the clock as the best available overall player. Then it's a pretty steep drop to Stephon Diggs, then another steep drop to a mini tier of Tyler Lockett and Keenan Allen. So normally I want to get a third running back. Like, I've been drafting 3 running backs in your first 4 picks, and I likely would have done this, right? I likely would have gone Kamara, Nick Chubb, Todd Gurley, and then Robert Woods would have made it back around to me. Likely, right? At that point, and maybe another wide receiver, since I wouldn't have taken DJ Moore. And in that position, I'm just snatching Robert Woods. And I feel good with my start of Todd Gurley, right? Nick Chubb, Alvin Kamara, and Robert Woods. But for right here, we'll take Robert Woods. We'll shore up both of our running backs and both of our receivers, and I feel really strong about this because I feel like I have 2 top 10 running backs right now and 2 top 12 wide receivers based on my rankings, which means I have 4 players so far that are all considered a wide receiver 1 or a running back 1. At this point with my 5th pick, I don't need to go running back here, but I want to get one of these best left running backs, guys that likely have a good workload, are the actual starter, before we get into the handcuff territory, before we get into the, this guy might start territory. So let's see what's there at my 5th pick. So here at the 5th pick, and I feel good on what's left on the board. David Johnson is still on the board, and David Montgomery is still on the board. So I have David Johnson right now as my RB20. He's at borderline top 20, as you can see. I have David Montgomery as my RB22. And then after that, there's a little bit of a drop off to like Devin Singletary, Mark Ingram, Cam Akers, guys that I think have upside, and Cam Akers, upside for sure in Singletary, but I'm not as high on them. So between David Johnson and David Montgomery is going to be my next pick. Based on the way that I have it ranked out, I have David Johnson a little bit higher. I think the concerns with David Johnson is Deshaun Watson doesn't check the ball down. Deshaun Watson is mobile. Deshaun Watson likes to throw the ball deep. Since he's entered the NFL, he's top 5 in just deep attempts overall per game, so that's a concern. The upside for David Montgomery is the offense gets better. He had 1,100 plus yards last year in potentially the worst situation for him. Negative game scripts. He wasn't doing much after this contact, so I think I'll go David Johnson here in the 5th round. The way that I look at this, though, it's really, really close. Like, based on my rankings, it says to go David Johnson, but I'm internally struggling right now because I think David Montgomery possesses a higher upside. Like, Johnson is definitely in the better offense, but Montgomery, if you look at what he did last year, and he just gets in the end zone more and he becomes slightly more efficient, not even like a top 15 efficiency back, but just a top 20, not like a dead fucking last efficiency back. Now you're in a situation where David Montgomery is going for 1,250 yards and 7-8 touchdowns. Like, I don't know if David Johnson has that upside in him or even has the health to do that, based on the fact that Duke Johnson's there for passing game work, based on the fact that the Texans just don't throw to running backs in general. So this is a pretty difficult decision for me. So let me know in the comments down below. Take a second of your time. David Johnson or David Montgomery? Who would you pick? They're right next to each other, right? Running back 20 and 22 for me. I think that the upside is higher for Montgomery at this point, and I have 2 stable backs in Nick Chubb and Kamara. I think that the median projection for David Johnson is clearly better based on my rankings and my projections of these players. I want to draft for upside right now, so I think I'm going to go with David Montgomery over David Johnson here. Let me know what you think about that. I just feel like the guy who lets me down more is David Johnson there. The guy who can be like, oh, he won me a league would be David Montgomery if he takes that second-year leap and the offense gets better. So we got our 3 running backs in our first 5 picks. We did the robust running back strategy very well. Kamara, Nick Chubb, David Montgomery. And when you also want to factor in robust running back, usually means to try and get these younger, healthier backs with workloads. Younger, healthier is going to be David Montgomery over David Johnson. With more of a workload, likely David Montgomery over David Johnson. So that's where I'm at so far. So to summarize the first 5 picks, you have Kamara, Nick Chubb, DJ Moore, Robert Woods, and David Montgomery. I feel really good about this start. Now we want to continue to pile up running backs and wide receivers for probably the next 3 or 4 picks before I start to get like that later round tight end, that later round QB. And let's see what we can do with our 6th pick. Let's see what just went off the board. So I'm looking at my board right now, and you can see a couple more quarterbacks. Kyler Murray went off the board. You're in a situation where more tight ends, Evan Ingram and Darren Waller. That's fine. I don't want any of these tight ends at this point. I think the difference between like tight end 6 and 7 and tight end like 18 or 20, honestly, is not that far off for the upside of all those guys in terms of what their ranking could potentially end up. So I'll just wait for those middle rounds, and the Jonnu Smiths, the Mike Gesicki's, whoever's left in that range is who I'll end up pulling the trigger on. Your Hayden Hurst potentially. So let's see where I'm at right now. So lots of good running backs left on the board. I mean, you have Devin Singletary, Mark Ingram, and Cam Akers is sort of a final tier of guys who can become workhorse backs. And then I'm looking at wide receivers. My only top 30 wide receiver left is Will Fuller, his teammate Brandon Cooks, and then Christian Kirk, Marvin Jones, Michael Gallup. Those are like my best available at wide receiver. I think that tier is very close of Will Fuller, Brandon Cooks, Kirk, Marvin Jones, and Michael Gallup. There's an argument to be made that one of Will Fuller and Cooks is sort of on a tier of their own, but we don't know which one yet, who becomes wide receiver 1 there. I have it as Fuller ranked 2 spots higher, but nothing major. I think if I can get one of that tier of the Fuller, Cooks, Kirk, Jones, Gallup, and even Deontay Johnson in that. If I can get one of those guys at my next pick, I'll feel pretty good. I don't know if I'll be able to get a Singletary, Ingram, or Akers there. So the way that I'm looking at this right now, we took David Montgomery, the young running back. I think I'm going to go Cam Akers here with my 6th round pick. I like Cam Akers. I don't like the offensive line. I think that's terrible, but I think they end up drafting Cam Akers to be the starter there. Malcolm Brown is just dusty. Maybe he'll get some goal line work, but I don't think he's going to factor into Cam Akers' workload all that much. And the upside for Cam Akers is, look, they drafted him over Darrell Henderson. The way that they describe the position is that Cam Akers is going to be more of the every down back, whereas Darrell Henderson has a role and Malcolm Brown will have a role. Like when you're saying those guys have a role, but Cam Akers is going to be somebody that you rely on, it seems like you're trending in the direction of letting him be the opening day starter. And if that's the case, if you get a starting running back in a very good offense in the LA Rams with the best draft capital on the team and one that they just took over Darrell Henderson, I think it's a situation where he can be starting, he can be good. If I snag up Cam Akers here, I'm pretty much done with the wide running back position in a 12-team draft or a 12-round draft in the 6th round. Whereas I look at wide receiver and I don't see that big of a drop-off between Fuller, Cooks, Kirk, Jones, Gallup. Like I don't see the biggest of drop-offs. Maybe there's a little one between Fuller and Cooks and like those guys, whoever becomes the number one there. But then I look at running back and after this range, it's James White, Tariq Cohen, DeAndre Swift, Ronald Jones, Phillip Lindsay, right? Jordan Howard, like that range of guys. Maybe you think Akers is closer to that. I personally don't. Mark Ingram and Singletary are definitely still on the board. I think Singletary is interesting. He's my highest ranked running back at RB24. I do have concerns though when I'm talking about the ceiling, right? His red zone role probably not going to be there with Zach Moss and Josh Allen. His pass catching role will still probably be there, but similar to last year since Zach Moss can catch passes and Josh Allen just still has the lowest check down rate in NFL history over the last 2-year span since entering the league. That's not good for running backs. And then you're banking on Devin Singletary, who did miss 4 games last year, but you're banking on him to continue this insane production that he had last year. Not going to happen. So I'll look at Cam Akers and say they use running backs in the red zone a ton. If he's the featured guy, which is what they've always done there under Sean McVay, mainly been Todd Gurley, but if he's the featured guy, right, talented player out of Florida State, never had an offensive line there, likely won't coming into the NFL, and he's getting red zone work, and he can pass protect, and he can catch, he's going to stay on the field. Let's snag it. Talk yourself into Cam Akers, why don't you? I'm going to snag Cam Akers with my 6th round pick. Let me know what you think about that. So now I have 4 running backs in the first 6 rounds, but in there I have 2 wide receiver ones based on my rankings. I have overall the wide receiver 11 and wide receiver 12. So now we're in a situation where I want to go back to the board here. I want to find a wide receiver, maybe get 2 wide receivers with my 7th and 8th round pick, and then start to look at tight end and quarterback. So let's see what came off the board as I approach my 706, the 6th pick in the 7th round. So some of those wide receivers I was looking at, my best available at that time, Will Fuller goes off the board, Gallup and Marvin Jones, but a lot are left. Brandon Cooks and Christian Kirk, Deontay Johnson too. Cooks is my highest ranked right now wide receiver. If I take a peek at the other positions, somebody just took Hunter Henry in the 7th round. Hunter Henry is my tight end 11. I wouldn't be taking that guy into like the double-digit rounds probably, and I would rather just take guys around him who I think have a higher upside. Running backs that went off the board, DeAndre Swift, Mark Ingram, James White, Devin Singletary. So my best available running backs, my 2 top 30 running backs left are Darius Geis and Matt Breida. So you can see I really don't want either of them. I think Breida's okay. I think Geis has a ton of upside. Like Geis has top 10 running back upside if he somehow beats out a crowning backfield of literally like 6 or 7 running backs. Peyton Barber's there, J.D. McKissick's there, Antonio Gibson there. There is so many running backs. Obviously, Adrian Peterson is there. So many running backs in that backfield that it's going to be tough to see him having a chance. I think Bryce Love is still in the team technically. So I do like Darius Geis, but his upside is immense, but his downside is also like finishing like running back 50, right? Being injured or just not even playing all that much. So I'm going to go wide receiver here. Brandon Cooks and Christian Kirk are my best available. I'll go with Brandon Cooks because I think he has the best wide receiver 1 upside by a decent margin because he's not sharing a wide receiver room with DeAndre Hopkins like Kirk is. Although I think Kirk has a lot of upside, I definitely think Kirk has 1,000-yard season, 6+ touchdown upside in that offense, even with Hopkins there. I think Brandon Cooks has a clearer path to it, and maybe even his median projection is like 950 to 1,000 yards plus with 5 or 6 touchdowns. So let's see what we can do here. We're now 7 rounds in. I have 4 running backs and 3 receivers. I'm going to go back to back. I want to double tap the wide receiver position. That's what I've been doing this entire draft. I double tap running back to start. I double tap receiver. Then I double tap running back. Now let's double tap receiver here with the 8th round. Let's see what just came off the board, and we'll go from there. So we get a run on quarterbacks. Not a single running back was taken in those 10 picks or so after I just drafted, but a run on quarterbacks, Wilson, Watson, Josh Allen, and Drew Brees. Drew Brees is my quarterback 12, so quite the reach in the 8th round in my opinion. Run on tight ends a little bit with Rob Gronkowski and Hooper. Gronk I think is a fair pick there, but Hooper, no way. He's my tight end 13. I don't want anything to do with Austin Hooper this year. So we're here at my 8th pick. Nothing has gone off the board at running back, so that means Geis is still there, Matt Breida is still there, and I don't need that. Let's see what's there at wide receiver. You can see how quickly wide receiver kind of eroded because I would have been fine with getting guys like Christian Kirk, who went 3 picks before me, Crowder, who went 5 picks before me, Deontay Johnson went a pick after Brandon Cooks. Now what's left on the board at wide receiver is John Brown, Preston Williams, Anthony Miller, Sterling Shepard, Jerry Jeudy. That is the best available at that position. I need to go there, though, because at this point, I don't think I need to take a quarterback with what's left. Definitely don't need a tight end, and I already have my 4 running backs, so I need to get some wide receiver depth now. My best available are pretty much going to be Preston Williams and Anthony Miller here. I'm probably going to pass on John Brown, so I like those 2 names a good amount. The one that I have ranked higher is Preston Williams by 1 spot. Again, Preston Williams was pretty much a top 10 wide receiver in the league through the first 8 weeks last year. Yes, he was. The second in red zone percentage at 37%. He's an absolute beast. Yards per game were up there. So this is a guy who I really like. Coming off an ACL tear, though, as an undrafted free agent rookie, an undrafted rookie, is a big issue for me. Potentially going into an offense that's going to change quarterbacks from Fitzpatrick. I think they should start Tua for the beginning of the season. It seems to be healthy, all reports. But if he changes 4 weeks in, that can mess up your offense a little bit. But I do think that Preston Williams has a clearer path to being the wide receiver 1 or producing like a wide receiver 1A to Devontae Parker's 1B, something in those regards or vice versa, than Anthony Miller does at outproducing Allen Robinson. I'm going to take Preston Williams here with my 4th pick of wide receiver, and that's going to be in the 8th round of a 12-team draft. And you can see how very good this team is, or very good this draft is, on just based on the positions that are being taken. Like wide receiver is now drained by the 8th round. Running back is already drained. Everybody is waiting on quarterback. Everybody is waiting on tight end. And when that happens, it's a situation where you can sometimes get leverage by going to a tight end. Like you have Tyler Higbee still on the board here, but I just don't feel the need to. So I go ahead, I draft Preston Williams. I draft him 1 spot ahead of John Brown, who I had drafted a little bit higher, but I want more upside there. John Brown's sort of like a consistency piece. Maybe he gets to like 850, 950 yards with Stephon Diggs there, but I think Preston Williams has more upside, and honestly his floor, as long as he's healthy, is probably similar to what John Brown's floor is in that Buffalo offense as the wide receiver too. We're now in the 9th round, so now is when I'm going to start to look at tight ends, quarterbacks, and I'll also still look at wide receivers and running backs. I have 4 receivers, 4 running backs. That's how I think you should start your drafts. Just wait on tight end and quarterback, even if guys start to drop. So let's see what's still left on the board. So quarterbacks start to go with Matt Ryan, Tom Brady, and Aaron Rodgers. That's fine. I see that Tyler Higbee goes. Jared Cook goes. Jared Cook I'm very low on this year. With Emmanuel Sanders being there, with just how often he scored a touchdown per target, I have Jared Cook as my tight end 18. Yes, I have him as my tight end 18. I know he's a borderline top 10 for a lot of guys. Not me. I'm not trying to give what happened last year. I'm trying to see what happened last year and see why it's not going to happen this year with players. Anthony Miller goes off the board about 3 picks before me. That's where my pick would have gone. The way that I'm looking at it right now, I still have a top 30 running back on my board. Matt Breida is still on the board, but we start to need to take tight ends. Lots of tight ends left. Hayden Hurst, Mike Gesicki, Jonnu Smith. Those are all guys that I'd be fine as my starter. Lots of quarterbacks left, but the 2 guys that I'm looking at are Matt Stafford and Carson Wentz. And now if I look at the board, pretty much everybody that's about to pick after me has taken a quarterback, right? You can see all these little green boxes. So if I'm thinking strategy here, what are the odds that they take a backup quarterback in the 9th or 10th round? I think very low, and I want either Wentz or Stafford here. So I think I can get back around. Now, how many guys have taken tight ends? Well, 2 of these guys have taken 2 tight ends, so they're probably not going tight end. These 2 guys have taken tight end, so they're probably not going tight end. This guy still has to take a tight end. So the way that I look at it is Baker's dozen is probably going to take a tight end, but I like Hayden Hurst, Gesicki, and Jonnu Smith. I think all those guys are fine if one of them falls back to me. So I think I can make it another round before taking a tight end or a quarterback at this point. So I think I'm going to do that. So what's the best available at the running back and wide receiver? Best available at wide receiver right now, we're pretty far down here. Guys like Jerry Jeudy, Mike Williams, McCole Hardman are still on the board. But if I look at running back, Matt Breida is still on the board as my running back 30. That's pretty good, right? There's a pretty decent drop off after that. So I think I'm going to go to Matt Breida here. I got my 5th running back. I locked the door on running back. I now need to go out there and get a quarterback and a tight end. So let's see what just came off the board. And thankfully, 2 tight ends go off the board. Hayden Hurst, no fan. I was okay with them going off the board. No quarterbacks go off the board. So our strategy of everybody after me has already taken a quarterback worked out well there. Now we're in a situation where the people in front of me, one guy, everybody is still taking a quarterback here, right? So maybe they take a backup. Every single guy here has already taken a tight end. So I need to go tight end and quarterback here. There's 3 rounds left. Let's see what we can end up getting to. And I'll also call out the huge run on running back here. Look at this. 6 running backs to start the 10th round. In the last 8 out of 9 picks were running backs. So a huge run on running backs. I'm happy that I went to Breida because my next available running backs would have been absolute dumpster fires more than likely at that point. Guys that are still left on the board though after all those running backs go. So some guys that went off the board, Ronald Jones, you can see Phillip Lindsay is still on the board, which is interesting, but I just don't need to get there at this point. So I need to go quarterback. I need to go tight end. The position that I feel more strongly about, I still like Matt Stafford and Wentz. They're both still on the clock if I got to one of them. And now I still like Mike Gesicki and Jonnu Smith. So I think I'm going to go with my quarterback here just because I feel more strongly about quarterback than I do about what's left at the tight end position. So I'm going to go with Matt Stafford over Carson Wentz. They're back-to-back in my rankings. I have them both as top 10 quarterbacks this year. So we get Matt Stafford, our quarterback, in the 10th round, and now we need to get our tight ends. So let's hope that one of them stay on the board. I'm watching for the red little tight ends, and no tight ends come off the board. Let's go, baby. So you can see more running backs. Just a run of dusty old running backs at this point. Not all of them are terrible. Like Jordan Howard will get work. I think Tariq Cohen has upside at that spot where you're taking him. A lot of the rookies start to go off the board in Zach Moss and Gibson. So we're in the 11th round now. I already have 5 running backs. I already have 4 receivers. I have a tight end. I have a quarterback, and I'm about to get my tight end. And in the final round, I would like to get a 5th receiver for this 12-round draft. So tight ends left on the board. Mike Gesicki is my tight end 10. Jonnu Smith is my tight end 12. I like both of those guys a lot. I would love to come away from this draft with both of them. Now I can't, unless I go back-to-back tight ends, which I don't want to do. I need some wide receiver depth, but I like both of those guys a lot right now. I have Gesicki ranked higher, so I'm going to go with Mike Gesicki here, but I do think that Jonnu Smith has top 10 upside at the tight end position. And you're going to sit there and go, no, he doesn't, Sal. Well, yeah, literally last year, the guy finished tight end 12 after the first 3 weeks. First 3 weeks of the season, he really didn't play. He wasn't involved in the offense. After that, those final 12 games that he's played, he was a tight end 12 in the league. So don't tell me that he can't finish tight end 10 when he finished tight end 12 last year over the final 12 weeks of the season that he played. So I think he has a lot of upside. I think if anything, that offense is due to regress and just naturally pass more than they did last year in Tennessee. So now we're here in the final round of the draft. Jonnu Smith doesn't get taken. I can go ahead and go get myself back-to-back tight ends, but then I only have 4 receivers, which isn't a death sentence. This is why you want more rounds in your draft. I'm just doing this for the video, so this isn't an hour-long video, and it's easier to edit and easier to watch for you all. So some of the wide receivers that go off the board to sort of end it out were some of the rookies. Jerry Jeudy goes off the board. You still have guys like Mecole Hardman on the board, who's probably my best available. Denzel Mims went off the board. I like him a lot. You can see some other guys, Henry Ruggs going off the board, these rookies. Robbie Anderson went off the board. So Mecole Hardman, Michael Pittman, and N'Keal Harry, they're all right next to each other in my rankings. Let me know which one would you take there. I think Mecole Hardman and Michael Pittman have huge upsides. I think Michael Pittman has the best upside right off the bat based on his offense, but N'Keal Harry is going to be a starter right away. I think Michael Pittman will be the X receiver. If anybody gets hurt, anybody, whether it's Tyreek, whether it's Robinson, whether it's Sammy Watkins, any of those guys get hurt, Mecole Hardman will be inserted in as a monster. Again, this is why you want more rounds in your draft so that I can take another one of these guys in my next pick, or Jonnu Smith here and then one of those guys after. So I want to snag a receiver. I think the way that we have our receivers, what do we have so far at receiver? Cooks, Preston Williams, DJ Moore, and Woods. I think Cooks, Woods, and DJ Moore are pretty consistent and solid wide receivers we can rely on. Preston Williams can have as that upside, but he also has a pretty shaky floor. Let's go Michael Pittman here because I think he'll be a starter right away, and I really do like the upside of Michael Pittman. So although I have Mecole Hardman and N'Keal Harry, Mecole Hardman is my wide receiver 50, Harry 51, Michael Pittman's my 52. I take him ahead of those guys just because I think the upside's a little bit higher. Maybe that means I should change my own rankings, but that's where we're at right now through 12 rounds. And look at that. We get a little bit of a B+. So let's go over this draft real quickly. So we go over the draft. We get our 10th round quarterback in Matt Stafford, and Carson Wentz was also still on the board there. We go back-to-back running backs that started off with Alvin Kamara and Nick Chubb. We then snag back-to-back receivers, both of which I have ranked as top 12 receivers, meaning they're wide receiver 1s in my rankings, in DJ Moore and Robert Woods. Then we get some depth at wide receiver with Brandon Cooks, potentially the wide receiver 1 out there for Houston. It is yet to be seen now that DeAndre Hopkins is gone. We get our 11th round tight end, Mike Gesicki, my 10th overall tight end. So I get a top 10 tight end based on my rankings in the 11th round. Can't beat that. And there was still another top 12, a tight end 1 in my rankings, Jonnu Smith, on the board at that time. Then you see my flex was David Montgomery with our 5th round pick. Took him over David Johnson. Again, let me know in the comments. David Johnson, David Montgomery. I have Johnson ranked higher, but I figured I'd go for the upside in Montgomery. Cam Akers then right after that we took. So we went back-to-back running backs in the 5th and 6th. Some of the younger guys, 2nd year Montgomery, the rookie Cam Akers. We get depth wide receiver pieces. 4th and 5th wide receivers taken were Preston Williams and Michael Pittman in that last round. Again, who would you rather have? Mecole Hardman, Pittman, or N'Keal Harry? I think in general, Mecole Hardman is a sexier name, but I think Michael Pittman has the most upside. If none of those 3 teams, the Patriots, the Chiefs, and the Colts had injuries, I think Michael Pittman probably produces the best with the opportunities he's given. And then Matt Breida was just sort of okay, this guy who's a top 30 running back is still here for me in like the 9th round of the draft, and I don't really need to reach on tight end or whatever quarterback at this point. I'm just going to go and get Matt Breida, get my 5th running back. So I took 5 receivers, 5 running backs, 1 quarterback, and 1 tight end through the 12 rounds. I think that's a pretty balanced, and I think that's a pretty good build. And based on my 87 out of 100 B+ rating by Fantasy Pros, we're doing pretty good right here. So again, make sure your drafts are like 20 rounds, not 12. This is just for the purpose of the video, because at this point, there's still guys on the clock. There's a lot of rookies left on the clock. We haven't even gotten to the range. I mean, Mecole Hardman and N'Keal Harry didn't even go drafted in this one, right? We haven't even gotten to the range of pretty low down where I think there's a ton of deep sleep upside at tight end, at quarterback. If you're playing 20 rounds, I definitely get a backup tight end. I definitely get a backup quarterback there. And then you have 6 more picks to kind of, maybe you get your 3rd tight end for upside, but more than likely you're taking 2 more running backs, 3 more receivers, something like that. So that's where we're at. This is picking from the 6th spot of the draft, the robust running back strategy. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video. Before you go, if you enjoyed the video, take a second of your time, hit the like button, the big old one, the big old subscribe button popping up on the screen. Hit that if you're watching on the YouTube version. If you listen all the way through in the podcast version, I really do appreciate you. Please do leave a review and subscribe to the podcast. 1 review a week gets a $50 giveaway from me myself, so leave a way for me to contact you via Twitter, via email, whatever it might be. But only like 3 people do that a week, so you got a very good chance. Even if you're watching on YouTube, you can just go over to Apple Podcasts, Sal Vetri Show. You want to make $50, you got a really good chance of doing so by just leaving a review. So thank you so much for tuning in. My name's Sal. Check out the Supreme Draft Guide, link down below. There's ways to get it down below. Limited time offer, only $10 thanks to Monkey Knife Fight. So check it out. And if not, if you're not eligible for that offer anymore based on when you're watching this or just based on the state that you live in, you can get it for the full price on my website, fantasysportsfocus.com. Get the link down below. Get your draft guide. Get smart. Get educated. Beat your league mates. You're going to do all that with that guide. So thank you so much. Supreme Draft Guide down below. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one.